Hey everyone. So today I'm going to take you through the installation of the HydrosPlus Performance Solution on the model year 2025, and we're working on a 2025R. I have a 2018 model year 1025R is going to sit in as my proxy for the differences between these two machines. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Kevin, don't you know that the 2025, 1025 and 2025R are all new machines? That's true, but also not true. And for what we care about with the HydrosPlus solution, it's not true because everything is still applicable that we're dealing with. That's a big plus, but there will be some differences. And I've already I have another video showing a few differences on this machine around the frame and other things. And that does come into play slightly, but materially it does not make any difference for this solution, whether you had a 2018 model or a 2025 model. So for those who are not familiar, really the only differences between a 2025 platform and a 1025 platform are tires, and wheels, of course, and really fenders and how things come up. Now, I've always said that the cockpit of the 2025R is just a little bit nicer. It has some features like this would be a good example where this is up here, it has covers, it looks nice. Same here. Not that this one doesn't look nice, but it's just a lever coming out of, down here somewhere, which is functionally is fine, works exactly the same. This one's just a little bit nicer. And, does that matter to you? Maybe, maybe not. But 2025R, fenders higher, largely the same, like the top of this. Now, I don't know this actually, I haven't done that part of the research, but the fender cover may be identical, but ultimately it's up a little higher. That means there's different bracketry. So this bracket here is much bigger on this machine than it is on that one. But you get the point. Fenders higher, tires bigger. Ultimately, it's the same machine. They share the same. Now, previous generations did not share the exact same pump, but it was basically the same pump. It was slightly larger on the 2025R. In the case of the 2025 year model, I'm gonna get tongue-tied at some point, I'm sure. The 2025 year model, the hydraulics are the same pump, everything. There's a little bit of a plumbing difference, and I'll talk about that shortly, but nothing that is a material change. It's just how they route it because of the fenders being higher. Okay, last thing I'll mention before we go over to the parts and pieces and some of the differences is, if you haven't seen this already at HydrosPlus, we now only offer for this platform a stage 3, which sounds funny. It's like having a large drink with no small or medium, but we just have the stage 3 at this point. There are more hydraulic things in the works that may include a bigger pump, but for the time being, that is the solution that we have. It's a single stage 3 solution. Doing this for years, very few people ended up with the stage 2. Even fewer of those had the stage 1. So now we are at a stage 3 only. So if that seems funny, it kind of is, but it's where we are. Maybe I'll rename it, but for the time being, it just says stage 3. All right, so let's jump over to the pieces of this solution. And I would say that this solution is easier to install than the previous year models, mainly because you can leave the seat on in this case. And the seat, while not terribly hard to take off, it's kind of heavy. And depending on if you have help or not, that can end up being the hardest part of doing the HydrosPlus solution. It's not hard to install, but it takes about an hour and a half or so for most people. But we do not have to take the seat off, but we do still have to take the fender off. And well, I'll say that part of the fender off, you could probably get around it, but I'm going to show taking it off, and I think that's probably going to be the ultimately easiest way to do it. But however you want to do it, you have that option. We'll be on the fender side. Don't take the seat off, take the fender off. That's a trade-off that I think is a net positive as far as how easy it is to install the solution. Now the parts and pieces here are a little different. There are a few pieces that will not be in this kit for the model year 25 that are in the other kit because we're dealing with a PTO manifold flow divider for that. In this case, because we have the dual pump, there is no PTO, well, there is a PTO switch that's in a different location, but no flow divider. For these tubes that you have, the plumbing is completely different, and you'll only get one of these tubes. So you'll get all three of these. This is the pump tube, this is the tube that connects to one of these longer tubes, and this is the steering tube. But for this one, this is on the 2025R because it has to go up higher to catch the SCV, and this is for the 1025R. This is a new piece completely. If you do not have a backhoe, we're going to make this piece, it'll be pre-threaded, so if you get this piece, you won't get a drill and tap. And because of this, this basically takes the place of what the backhoe subframe would be on the machine. In this case, they have changed basically the thickness of the material for the frame. It's more like a truck frame, whereas this machine just has a single piece of 3/8 steel going straight down to be the frame rail. This has a C-channel frame rail that's 3/16. But regardless, you still have the 3/16 frame rail, but if you get the backhoe subframe, it is a piece of 3/8 that bolts up to it. And so what we're doing, previously we had spacers that we would send. And the reason we sent spacers versus doing something like this is because that the frame rail was already a 3/8. With this being smaller, and let me show you one other thing, there's also a recessed area here. So this is the ROPS, basically. This is actually the cab piece, but if you don't have a cab, it'll be the ROPS piece. And then if you have a backhoe subframe, that'll actually go over this part, similar to what we're doing here. So we're kind of replicating a small piece of the backhoe subframe. Because we're sending it, we can pre-tap the holes for you. So all you've got to do is take out some existing bolts, bolt it on just like you would the subframe, and then mount up your flow divider, which is honestly will be a lot easier if you don't have a backhoe. If you do have the backhoe, you won't get this, and you will get a drill and tap, and you'll do it just like the previous, all the previous ones, except for all of them previously to model year 25, use the drill and tap in order to mount it to the actual frame of the tractor or the subframe of the backhoe. So one other call out, so we get same hardware, so we have two bolts that need to be longer because this is a physically larger pump. You'll use your existing bolts for the bottom piece. One thing we are going to start doing is sending these pieces, these fittings, not installed on the flow divider. Previously, we always installed them, and that really started early on because we did not have O-ring fittings for the flow divider we were using at the time, and it was hard to use pipe threaded type fittings and get them indexed correctly, so we did that for you. Now, because these are so easy to install, we're going to leave them out. What that does is it makes sure that we don't have any leakage of oil out of this. It has some oil in it just for rust preventative. But also, these lines being longer, previously we could send all of the parts and pieces in a, what we call a 12-12-6 box. It's 1 foot by 1 foot and it's 6 inches deep. Because we have these long tubes, we're going to have to have more of an elongated box, maybe something like a 6628 or a 6630, something to that effect, so that we can get these longer tubes in. But then we're also going to have these pieces. We may have to box them separately. So this is not going to be anything that most people think about, but in case, you know, especially at this point when we've got some people are getting one kit, and then some people are getting like a 2024 model and a 2025 model. If you were to watch an unboxing, or if your neighbor gets one and he has the previous year, it's going to look a little bit different when it arrives, but ultimately it's going to work the same as it always has. Okay, as mentioned, I'm going to talk through this. I'll point out all the things you need to take off, but you're not going to see me taking them off. I do have a video that covers, at least on an earlier model, taking pretty much all these same things off, because this tractor really isn't different than the previous versions. But, well, this tractor is different in that it's the cab version, so a few things that are missing are different, but you know what I mean. Bolts, like on the floor panel here, same bolts. If you have a 2025R, you have this rivet here, et cetera, et cetera. So let's start with, I would start with, you can do this probably by not doing some of this, up to you if you want to try to do it that way. Once you see the full kit in action, you might say to yourself, oh, you know what, I could probably get to all those things and not have to take the fender off. I would say definitely do that if you know what you're doing. But for most people, what we're going to do is, and I don't have the covers on here, but I've got this kind of just sitting here. 3mm hex, you can pull this off. Now, can you pull this off with this on? Probably. Up to you if you want to try to do that. If you can't, use the 3mm hex and take it off. Here, you actually just pull straight up on this, and it might fight you. I've already taken mine off, and so I'm able to take it off quite easily. But you pull that up, and there's two Phillips head screws down here, two 13mm with some washers and actually a spacer in here. It has these covers on top of this, as you can see here. You'll see on your tractor as you're doing this, but we can pull this out, up and out and over, once we get all of those bolts loose. Now for the fender, it's pretty similar, 1025 versus 2025R. You're going to have two of the bolts on this floor piece that are holding on to the fender, and kind of gives you the structural integrity in the front. On the 2025R, we have this body rivet. You don't have that on the 1025R. I'm almost 100% certain, 99.9 we'll say. This is a cab version, so I don't have a handle here, but I just still have the bolts that bolt this on. You're going to need to take those loose from the underneath in order to separate the black piece from the green piece, and you need to do that because you have what I would call a cigarette lighter, but it's a 12-volt port. You've got your USB port, and if you don't have the cab version, you have lights here. And this wiring harness comes up into there, and if I remember right, you will have to separate these so that you can pull that out. Now my wiring harness I didn't put back in because I'm lazy. I'll say that over and over. But other than that, there's bolts in the bottom of this here, the bottom here, and there's one bolt back there. Now that's for the 2025R, and while it's very similar, it's a little bit different with the 1025R. Now the same type of thing applies. You're going to have to separate the black from the green in order to get your wiring harness out. Unhook this, bolts in the center of both of these, and a bolt back here. Now you can leave this cover on because as you pull the front piece off, you can just lift it up. But the one other thing, step on stuff here, on this machine or on this size, there's a nut that comes, I gotta get it in the right spot, if you can see that. There's a nut right there that you'll have to take off here. And then getting up to this handle here, there is, I think they're bolts, yeah, that go through there. On the one with the 2025R that doesn't have the handle, bolts go through that way. But then you also still have the two that are underneath the floor panel. Now, on the 1020, on the older version, let me back up. I think that all of them, 1025 or 2025R, I'll have to confirm it in the video below, is going to have this as a two-piece, which is much nicer than the single piece in that you can actually take these bolts loose. You can take all of these bolts and you can kind of move this almost completely out of the way. You could probably just leave it there generally, but you've got to get your green part and the black part of the fender out from underneath there. Much easier to do when it's not connected to the middle and the other side. So other than that, you want to take, there's a knob here. Show you what it looks like. It'll be on here. This is to lock out your loader so that it doesn't move if you don't want it to move. And you'll need to take this knob off so it can slip through that hole. You'll put this in the center, and then you're going to wrestle with getting this off. You have to separate this enough because this doesn't, it probably comes off, but they, in the previous manuals at least, they do not recommend taking that off. You just slide it over. This hole is big enough to slide completely over the loader lever. And if you have the cab version, I think this is a little more invasive than the typical ROPS, which probably are more similar to this one. So this one will just kind of come up and out of the way. On the cab version at least, I had to fight it just a bit to get it out of the way, but you'll get it no problem. It's not really that hard, just something to call out. So let me go ahead and take this fender off, and I'll get to the kind of the guts of what we need to see in order to start the installation. Okay, we've got all the components off, and I might just add one for the 2025R owners. One thing that's a little different on this is how this comes up. This is in support of that taller, bigger fender. You might take this off, you can see it from the outside and kind of pull it out, especially if you have the cab version of the ROPS. It is a little bit tough to kind of get this out. Now I just bent mine and got it out, but I'm not super particular about my plastic. Of course, I don't want to tear it up if I don't have to, but I'm not as particular as some people. If you're very particular, I would recommend taking that out, and you'll have an easier time getting it out anyhow. That's for 2025R, 1025, you don't have that problem because we have that bar that's coming under here. That's what holds the structural integrity for it, and so we don't have as much trouble getting the fender out of there. But now that we have this here, as I mentioned before, this on the 2025R comes in and goes down and around and mates up to the front side of our pump. With a 1025R, this 45-degree fitting will actually be turned up, and it's going to come up here, go into the fender a bit, and then drop in from this side, going to the same location, same pump. Now, I want to make sure, I think these are a 7/8 nut here. Most of the time a 3/8 tube will have a 13/16 tube nut, which you can obviously get off with a 7/8, but just for reference, I think I had to use 7/8 on these. You'll take this tube nut off as well as this one, and then you can go ahead and take, I'm going to go ahead and take the one off there, but that'll bring this whole line completely off. And then there's also there where it goes into the steering. The steering actually goes into the PTO switch, and then it's pumped out to the steering part of it. But that's where it enters here. We'll take this line off completely. Now on the 1025R, see, we have actually a linkage here that connects here. On the 1025R, it'll be more direct, but you may have to just move the lever out of the way. On the 2025R, I took the linkage off just to have a little easier access. You can get off without doing that, but taking the linkage off will make it a little bit easier on the 2025R. So we get our lines off. We'll take our spring clamp, move it back, pull our suction tube back, and then we're going to take 2 bolts out here, not the top 2, but the second from the top 2, and then the very bottom, not these bottom, but underneath, and that's going to release our pump from the transaxle, and we'll pull it back. So let me do that part, and I will show you what we see once all those pieces are off. The lighting's not great here, but best I can do with where we are at the moment. So with the new HydrosPlus Stage 3 pump, we're going to do, at the bench, we're going to go ahead and put on the fitting on the side here, as well as pull the plug out of the end. Now for the fitting on the side, you can use, I think this is probably a little bit smaller, but the nut that's on here is a 15/16. So I'm loosening this up with my channel locks. And the way this works, since it's an O-ring fitting, You don't have to tighten it all the way in. You really just need to put it in at least probably 2 or 3 turns. And then you can leave it here. If you needed a little extra space, you can go out to here. Or if you needed to get a little tighter, you can go in. Now I wouldn't go in more if I didn't have to. About here is about right. You see a couple threads there. And then I'm not gonna tighten it up, but once you use this jam nut to, I'm gonna snug it up here. That's gonna push the O-ring into the face here and you won't have any leaks. Now on this side, we just take our pliers, grab our plug on the end gently and pull it away. Now it's gonna fight me. There we go. So now that we have the pump ready to go, we'll go back over to the tractor and I'll show you how easy it is to put on. All right, now that we've got our pump prepped and ready to go, I've got my gasket. Like I said, most of the time 99% of the ones I've done, the gasket stayed just like that. This one, tractor was absolutely brand new and had, when I took it off, had like 1 hour on it. So the gasket did come off. So I kind of stuck it up there with some grease. Now you can get that gasket if you like. Like I said, RTV is more than sufficient and it's what I would recommend. I think it's what John Deere, they do sell that gasket, but I think in the manual they say to use RTV. So anyway, so basically just center it up here on the coupler and you'll have to turn it maybe just to get it aligned and then go ahead and push it on. Now the bolts that I supply for these here are longer, so you'll go ahead and put those in. And the bolts that came out of the bottom will go in as well, and we'll connect that up. So I'm going to just kind of start these. So now that we'll get the pump on, we'll go ahead and put the suction tube on, get that secured, and then I'm going to move over to the lines here next. There it is, back on with everything secured. Now one thing that I forgot to mention earlier is the PTO shield holder is different on this machine, and previously with the 2025R it was like integrated into the transaxle. On the 1025R there were different bracketry. Now they are consistent between the 1 and the 2 series, and it's this piece here. I'm not going to recreate this piece, but I am going to have a piece that goes on here that will extend it out and so that your PTO shield can fit. This pump is physically larger just by a little bit, but it's enough. Well, in this case, it's not only physically larger, that's actually not the bigger problem. There is this piece here that interferes with a part of the PTO shield, so you can cut it if you want and use these existing pieces, up to you, but I will have, I'm not showing them in this video, but I will have some additional pieces that will extend this out just a bit so that you can put your bracket on and continue to use it the same as before. Now, I am going to go, you can do this in a few different ways, but I'm going to go ahead and move to putting this tube on. Now this tube, rather than coming around and going back to here, we're no longer going to do that. We are going to take the tube and it's going to go straight through there. So I'm going to move from kind of the right side of the machine as you're looking at it from the back, and then we'll move around. So I'll put this tube on, get it ready, we'll go to the pump tube, and then everything else will be on the left side of the machine. So the tube, the longer tube here, is for the 2025R, and in order to do this, and I already have these loose, you will need to take this bracket loose because I won't say you can't do it without taking this loose, but it's going to be pretty tough. Let me take this out and I'll show you kind of how this goes, and then we're going to go over we're going to go over to the 1 series. And I'll show you a slight difference here. So this longer tube here is going to go inside of here, and if you're looking in there, there'll be a clear hole that you can go through, and as you can see, it's going to mate right up to it there. Now let me get the 1 series tube, and I'll show you what it looks like on that machine. Okay, here we are on the 1 series, and one thing I forgot to mention is This black piece, it's the underside of the fender, which I have here. On the 1 Series, this isn't going to come off because the tubes go through it. On the 2 Series, they don't actually go through it. So you can actually pull it off from the bottom before you get to the point where you take the fender off. That makes the 1 Series maybe a little more challenging because both, you're gonna have to unhook the bolt that goes through here, and then you have to get to the 2 bolts with the handle in order to get to the electronics that are between the black and the green piece. But nonetheless, this is not going to be a problem. We just mostly leave this in place. Now you might take this cover off, so I have this kind of laying here, but you can take this off. It actually goes on here, so you'll take it off and set it to the side. That side cover is harder to come off because you have to take the handle off, but we'll set that to the side. This port here, now it's going to be a 45-degree angle and not, I need to check 100% to see if it's this particular bracket, but I think it is the identical bracket because it uses the same piece here. But rather than coming out and going back this way from, with the stock tubes, it's actually going to come out and go up, and then the tube on the 1 Series comes back here and then goes down through one of these holes here, I'm not sure which one actually, to get back to the dual pump. Now on this tractor, a 2018 model, this line actually comes out and goes through to where we're going to send our line. So we have this line here, and what we'll do, I'll show you, just kind of fish it through. It's going to be under this rock shaft cylinder is actually in here. And you may get kind of hung up a little bit on the other side, as you can see, as we're coming like out and through, but you'll be able to get it in there, fish it back and forth and around, and then ultimately you're going to get to it where it is out on that side, and it's going to be ready to be connected to the 45-degree angle fitting here. I can't do it with one hand very good. Well, the one other thing you might need to do, depending, is you may need to move your arms down in order to give you that space, because this mechanical linkage, if so equipped, can get in the way. Now the other thing that's different with this machine is this line here will not be there because this is the PTO manifold, so hard to explain exactly without having it. There it is. We're going to have it come through like this, and again that's going to connect here. Now if you feel like this line here, it's a long line that's snaking through, and the way we have it designed, it should pretty much miss everything. If it is laying up against something, that's not going to be an issue. This does have a lifetime warranty on it, but if you feel that you need to use maybe a zip tie or something to kind of pull it off of something, if you feel like that's a challenge, or you can actually make some bends to this if for some reason, again, I don't have every single configuration. If you have something that happens to be hitting for whatever reason, you can make bends of this line. They'll need to be do it slowly and just do it manually. Obviously you don't want to kink it. If you do end up accidentally kinking it, let me know and we'll get you another one out. But again, the way it is set up, it basically follows the same path as the original older model of this, so we should miss everything that is on this particular machine. So that's the 1 Series line, comes out on that side. 2 Series line, very similar, but it starts a little higher, kind of goes down and then cuts across and goes through on that side. Now on the previous models of the 2025R, they actually don't use a hard line here. They use a hose that goes from the SCV over to this side, and then it connects into the PTO manifold for 24 and earlier models. So This, if you feel like a hardline is an upgrade, it's an upgrade, but honestly, those hoses are, really good. They're going to last, especially underneath. There's no weather getting to them. The hose will basically last as long as you probably have the tractor. So, but in our case, we're going to use a hardline, at least unless we get a lot of feedback saying, hey, that should just be a hose, maybe we'll change it. But for right now, we're going to use a hardline. It's going to go through and across, just like that. And like I said, we'll move from that. Let me go get the line for the pump, show you how that fits on, and then we'll move to the left side of the tractor. Well, I might have got a little ahead of myself, at least if you don't have the backhoe. So I did go ahead and put the tube and got it started here, but I want to leave this open because we do have a plate that we're going to put here on this machine since it does not have a backhoe. If you already have a backhoe, then it's fine because you don't have to get behind here, but because we're going to put this plate on, I want to make sure that I can move this up and out of the way. Now, in order to put this plate on, we're going to take out this bolt here and these two bolts here. On the subframe, these bolts are inset just like this plate does. So this plate doesn't, you don't have to take these bolts out. It goes over those bolts, but we're going to use this one and these two to hold it on. And I'm pretty sure, I'll confirm here in a second, that those are 18 millimeter. All right, we have our plate mounted here. And as mentioned before, if you do have a backhoe, then this plate is not going to come with it, and you're going to need to drill and tap your own holes. And depending on exactly where you mount it, you have some flexibility in mounting it, but we'll do this a little bit differently if you don't have the backhoe versus if you do. So if you don't have the backhoe, you're going to have this plate, and go ahead and mount it on here. These are 18 millimeter. You might be able to make do with a 3/4, but it's going to be a little bit sloppy, so be careful there. The torque spec on this bolt, according to the owner's manual or the service manual, is 100 foot-pounds. I would say just really tight. You don't have to necessarily torque it, but if you're somebody who torques things, then that's what it shows the spec on an 8.8 M12. So with this plate on, I'll bring my line down here. Now you may, depending on, actually this needs to go over, under, all right, yeah. So I've got some things pulled out just because with the cab, not that it's different wiring, but it's a factory cab, but they put it on after the fact, I guess is what I would say. So I've got my line here. Now there is a plug here. I think this is the PT. No, this is it's a sensor for hydraulics, but you have to get around that. That is something that is new on the previous years. They have one of those, but it's not in that place there. And so we'll mount it to the now this is a different flow divider because I'm going to use the one I already had on it, but we'll mount it to the holes in the plate, and then we'll go ahead and connect everything to it. If you have a backhoe and you're going to do your own lines, and you may need to reference the previous installation videos, but what I recommend doing is connecting the lines up, put it in the right place. We'll use a punch or some type of marking procedure in order to say where your holes are going to be, and then you can go ahead and drill and tap those. Now what I may do, I'm going to go ahead and maybe give you I've thought about this before, like giving measurements based on this, but I actually think that doing it where you mark it ends up working better. Now when you do this, whenever you put everything together, I would recommend going ahead and tightening it up, and just make sure that you've got clearance here. These on this side are not going to have to worry about clearance, and because they're the 3/8 lines, they can be manipulated just a bit. This one is tougher to manipulate, so make sure that wherever you connect it on the back here, that you have the proper clearance, and you're not too high. This line here, as the 3-point goes up and down, with it up here, I'll have to put it down and remind myself. This is a new cast piece. It's different than the previous years, and it is a little bit closer to the frame, I would say. So you want to put your 3-point down, and then so that you can kind of cycle it and make sure you're getting the right clearance. But what I would say is, just as long as you have some air gap here, you're good to go, and you know that it's not pushing down on hard. You know, the vibration over time could get it if it was pushing hard, but for the most part that shouldn't be the case. So anyhow, without the backhoe, you'll have this plate, everything will be pre-drilled for you. With the backhoe, connect everything up, mark your holes, drill tap, and then install. So I'm going to go ahead and put this flow divider on and show you what it looks like. All right, well, that's what it looks like with all the lines connected, and I'm using the existing flow divider that I was already using on this machine. So my fittings were already on, but use the same approach where you cycle them on here and then snug them up with the jam nut. Now this one doesn't have a jam nut because it's a straight fitting, so it just goes in the bottom. So it's a straight here, a 90 here with the smaller end, and then the 1/2 inch, the bigger end, 90 here. So this is a 1/2 inch to 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch to 3/8, and then 1/2 inch to 3/8 here. Now just a tip, well, one, to put these back in place. I think there's a spot for it back there, but this one, this is a 2025R, and so I actually ended up pulling this linkage out. There was a pin holding it in, but put this line on first before you put this one on, because you're going to need to use some space over here to actually get to that line. Now my line's all for the 3/8 or 13/16, but you can use a 7/8, especially in a spot where you get in a funny place where you can't hardly get the wrench on it, or you need the extra space. Go ahead and use a 7/8. It, you know, runs the risk of marring the bolt just a little bit, but if you're in a tight spot and you can't get to it, that's kind of your only choice. Put this one on, and then this one here. Now this is a 13/16, but the line that we put in from the other side is a 3/4. That's a male O-ring face seal on the end of this line, and the female is the 13/16, goes down here to the bottom, and then our 1/2 inch line. Now this, as I said, is my existing one. Don't worry that I don't have my cap here. I placed that somewhere. But anyhow, I bolted this on. Now, when you do this for the one with the backhoe, go ahead and put it like this. Mainly this one and this line, that'll really position you, but I would go ahead and put all three, stick something in to make a mark, and then drill and tap your holes based on those marks. You may not be able to use this top hole depending on how you position it because of how the subframe plate goes, but you definitely will be able to use these bottom two. That's why we have three in the flow divider. On the other side here, as you can see, we've got this all on and tightened up. It goes in this way, and if you have the 1 series, it's going to be the same. It's just going to be down here a little lower and going across, going back to the other side. And once you're done with that, before you start putting things back together, it might be a good idea, go ahead and check all of your fittings, tighten them up, make sure your clamps are in place. And at this point, we can actually go ahead and start it. Not sure if I double check myself. And what I do is I'll go ahead and put this forward down so that it will be down, and then I'll go ahead and pull it back. Oh, one thing I did do for this and won't have to do for the 1 series is went ahead and put this linkage back on. But we can start it up. You can see it's already come up. So it's already primed. Really just got to prime from there up to the pump. And so everything is primed. I could have steering work, because I don't have any back wheels on it, and loader. I'll show you a little more of that. You can see the loader does move here. So once that's primed, all the circuits are charged, steering works. This pump only operates the steering, and the implements, the hydrostatic, is a separate pump. So it does provide some charge pressure for that. But as far as actually implements or things that it moves, it's going to be the loader, any other implement you have, including the 3-point hitch, and then the steering. So what I'm going to do from this point, we've got everything back together. I'm going to go and put I've got a pin and a linkage to put on. Just make sure that I don't have any leaks. You can, before you do it, you can dry things off. And when you start it, don't use your hand to look for leaks. That's a no-no in hydraulics. But then, let it run for a bit, turn it off, and if you can see, some seeping or anything like that, most likely, brief pause for the air compressor. If you see any seeping or any leakage, most likely it's just something that you forgot to tighten completely, or maybe an O-ring fell out. The one that I would watch out for, it's whistling over there, is the one in the end of this male fitting. That would probably be the easiest one to fall out. These fittings don't typically have any concerns like that. So anyway, look for leaks. Once you're sure everything is dry and you're ready to go and everything's primed up, you can go ahead and put your fender back on, wheels, tires, and you'll be good to go. All right, we're gonna try something a little different on the demo here. Just because this tractor doesn't have a ROPS on it, I don't have a good place to actually put the camera. So I've mounted it on the loader, and I'm hoping we'll be able to see two functions at once quite easily. That said, if you can't really tell that it's two functions at once, there are other videos on my channel that shows you just how fast things are, but since the camera's riding along with the boom, it might not be as clear. So what I'm gonna do, I've got two piles of gravel here. I'm not gonna move it around. I'm just gonna dip a few buckets and dump them out because honestly, it's almost 8 o'clock here. It is hot still. Let's get this demo going here and wrap it up. I'm gonna go up to about 2,300 RPMs for speed I like with a stage 3 with this loader. So to give you an idea where we are, that's as high as it'll go here. You can see, it makes it very easy. The sweet spot for two functions at once gets a lot better. Alright, so let's try this V-Stone. Now I've still got the stock cylinders on, so I don't have a whole lot of lift capability. It's hard to get a full bucket. Just see, it'll break out a little bit. 2/3 of a bucket. Then coming up to dumping somewhere. I do have some rear ballasts, but it's a little bit lumpy out here. That's some V-Stone. I'm going to go over here to this three-quarter clean is what we call it. A little bit easier to scoop, a little finer material. I just don't have enough power without backing up, so it is hard to get a full scoop without my HydrosPlus lift cylinder. One place where I feel like it just makes everything smoother is like resetting for another scoop here. So if you come in, generally you're taking it somewhere, you're not putting it right back where it was. Boy, it is hard to get a full scoop. That's all it wants to lift. But you get your scoop, you go wherever you're going to go. Go dump it. And then as you're backing out, you're able to reset your bucket very easily to go back wherever you're going to get another scoop. All right, that is it for the install of the model year 2025 HydrosPlus Performance Kit. As you can see here, if you just look at this tractor, you wouldn't know anything is different, but now rather than having 3.5 to 4 gallons per minute, we are 9.5 to 10 gallons a minute of total flow at wide open throttle. Of course, this is still stock, as I mentioned. We've got stock lift cylinders, but if you are going to put larger lift cylinders and tilt cylinders on it, I would say the Performance Kit is a requirement. It is just too slow to operate the larger cylinders without having the additional hydraulic flow. So that's it for this one. Questions, comments, leave them below, and thanks for watching.